On a recent trip, we worshiped with my sister and her husband in Nashville, Tennessee. The preacher that day was talking about the raising of Lazarus from the dead, John chapter 11. He came eventually to verse 28. The words there are from the lips of Martha. She said to Mary, "The teacher has come and is calling for you." I'll admit that I don't know much of what the preacher said for the next several minutes because I was hung up on that one verse. Oh, sure, I was very familiar with it, but this time it had new meaning, or at least new possibilities. I thought of sermons. I suppose I, along with a lot of other preachers, have been guilty of sermonizing, taking a passage and pulling it out of its original context and making it say something today that it didn't originally mean. And mark it down that was a very physical setting. Jesus had been in the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He was their friend. Lazarus had died. He came to comfort Mary and Martha. He had physically come, and he was calling them for a specific purpose to comfort them in their grief. Still, I think there's a basic point. He came from heaven, and he calls all of us. He has a great drawing power. Go from John chapter 11 to chapter 12, verse 32. Find Jesus saying, "And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto myself." I believe that when we listen carefully to the story of the cross, we'll feel that drawing power. Again, I'll call your attention to 1 Timothy chapter 2, where Paul calls for us to pray for kings and all those in high places that we may live peaceful and quiet lives. And then he adds in verse 3, "This is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior, who would have all men be saved and to come to a knowledge of the truth." He wants everyone. Hear the tender invitation of Jesus. You've heard it many times at the end of sermons. Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest to your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." You see, the Lord does draw us. Have you ever noticed that it seems all of nature points to God? I've had several people tell me that the mountains are just a cathedral for worship. I've quoted Judy in this very setting like this, these moments with Jim, talking about walking on the beach and how it's a powerful place for prayer. N.T. Wright, in his book, Simply Christian, says that our basic senses, the 5 senses, are evidence that something is different with us. Something is calling us. All of nature seems to be called to God. Sometimes we need to drop out of the busyness of the world. We often need to drop out of the arguments in Christianity and get back to the simple, pure love of God, the life of Jesus, the person of Jesus, the grace and mercy, and realize that the Lord indeed has come, and he's calling for all of us.